We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 5, episode number 18. And yeah, we back up in this thing, man. I appreciate you guys falling through, boy. Woo, it's been an exciting last couple days around the sporting landscape. And to my OGs, I appreciate the fall through. I appreciate the check in. If it's your first time listening, we on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide high fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And boy, man, it feel good, man, to be midweek, man, off the back end of the holiday. You know, I know it's been a hot minute, man, since I checked in with y'all, man. You know, I was just enjoying the holiday just like everybody else, man. You know, getting my eat on, getting my cook on, you know, doing some other various things, man. But it feel good to be back up in this thing, man. And yeah, man, it's an interesting week. You know, first I'll start off with, you know, you had the whole situation with Lane Kiffin moving on from Ole Miss up to LSU, Baton Rouge, go Tigers. And it was a big thing, man. And, you know, the funny part about it for me is that, you know, if this was, 10, 15 years ago, it really wouldn't be a big deal. Meaning that Ole Miss would be in a situation where they would be probably playing in one of the elite bowls. And then the season is basically over. But now you got the college football element, playoff element in this whole thing, and you literally have a team that's currently ranked 6th within the college football playoff rankings. Easily the best Ole Miss team we've probably seen since the 1960s. Have a legitimate shot at winning the national championship this season. And just based on, you know, just the timing of the calendar, you know, is that he got an exit stage left. And, you know, there was a big question out there, and I sat back and I soaked it all in. You know, I wanted to, you know, kind of hear everybody else's opinion just in regards to it before I made mine. And, you know, for me, it's just a situation of this. You know, we all know what Lane Kiffin about, those who follow college football. You know, just like any other, you know, good coach. You know, they like to get their ego stroked a little bit. And, you know, I think that Baton Rouge, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, is probably a better job than, say, Ole Miss. And no disrespect to Ole Miss. You know, I done been down there, man. You know, I done kicked it on the campus of Ole Miss. And, you know, it's just, you know, for them, you know, it's just a sad situation because, yeah, Kiffin and just that whole implosion of NIL and, you know, put Ole Miss right, you know, back into, as we see now, title contention. And so for him to leave, you know, LSU, you know, we'll see what he do. You know, obviously I think that for him, he just wanted to cash in. You know, he was able to reprise his reputation, you know, when he got, you know, down to Oxford. But now, you know, the pressure is on because basically every coach before Brian Kelly has coached at LSU has won a national championship down there at LSU. And they've had some of the best football players we've seen, you know, over the last, say, 10 years. So probably any school in the country outside of Alabama. So, you know, it's a big time job. You know, don't get it twisted. Now, do I put the blame on Kiffin for leaving? I mean, at the end of the day, if we feel like he want to go coach the LSU Tigers, so be it. Do I think that Ole Miss should allow him to coach the team? Hell to the no. Because at the end of the day, you know, you can't have the guy in your building, man, doing, you know, national signing, you know, day and, you know, just a week of, you know, recruits coming in and so forth. You know he's not going to recruit for Ole Miss. So, man, come on, man. So, I don't really fault Lane just as far as, like, the move, but, you know, I just think that what could have been worked out is just a wink-wink situation. I'm back like, man, I got to coach my team. Dude, I got a chance to win the national championship. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, can we holler back in January sometime? You know what I'm saying? Late January, you know, we can make this thing move. I mean, it's LSU. Damn, how many recruits you going to lose, man? We'll get it figured out. But, you know, we'll see what he do, man. See how that situation unfolds, man. Him going down there. Also, man, you know, we can't forget about the National Football League on the forefront, man. The National Football League closed out. It was a nice little week. You know, you had Kansas City lose. Now they facing the albatross in a, you know, must-win situation for them moving forward. You know, you got the Dallas Cowboys out here. You know, a lot of people think they the hottest thing smoking out here across the National Football League. You know, a couple wins, you know, against the Eagles, you know what I'm saying? You beat, you know, Kansas City, you know, you beat up on a couple teams that are, in my opinion, sliding at this point. So I'm not believing all the hyperbole with the Dallas Cowboys right now. And I'm not one to say, hey, Dallas fans, don't get at me. You know, I know y'all are a passionate fan base. I'm not trying to be, you know, overly disrespectful. I just think that you are what you are at this point. meaning that the defense I still don't really believe in like that, because they haven't really, shut down what I consider high power offense on the constant or consistent. And that's what you got to be, especially if you're trying to make a playoff run to get into the playoffs, and also too when you get in there. So I just don't believe that with the Dallas Cowboys, and so, you're looking at, the two teams who went to the Super Bowl last season. It's been rough out here these last couple of weeks. And speaking of that, the Philadelphia Eagles took an L to my Chicago Bears on Black Friday. Man, boy, was it up, man. Just ran the ball straight down their throat, man. And I'm going to preview, just the week coming up, man, shortly in the show. But also, man, we'll switch gears a little bit as well, man. It's just big time news out here in the National Basketball Association, man. Woo, boy. I'll get into, just all the, various, things that I see kind of, across the landscape as far as the teams and, what I'm seeing cracking across the Western and the Eastern Conference a little bit later on. But, man, we got to talk about this Giannis thing that just dropped. And, Giannis, word on the street is now, going to the Milwaukee, to the brass saying, hey, let's talk it out. I mean, that obviously means in gentleman's terms, get me up out of here, fam. You know what I'm saying? They don't have no more chess moves to make. You know what I'm saying? You waive Damian Lillard, you bring in, Turner. And so it's a situation with me, Doc Rivers there, obviously, it's over for Doc. You know what I'm saying? It's over for Doc. You know what I'm saying? Doc easily, he left TV. He can go back to TV. Doc gonna be fine. But as far as coaching in the NBA, right now, currently, it's a wrap for Doc. You know what I'm saying? You got your chip out the game, Doc. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's been one. And I think it's been one for Giannis. I think this is the last caveat between the relationship of Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that it's in best the team as well as him best interest to move forward. And it pains me to say that from a perspective of I'm from the Midwest, representing Chi-Town. And Milwaukee, they right up the street. And so it's an area in a region that, especially for their fan base in the state of Wisconsin, he's been the biggest, basketball player they've seen there since, Lou Alcindor, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And obviously Oscar Robertson played up there as well. But man, this will be a huge deal to the Milwaukee Bucks. And that's the sad part about it, man, because Giannis is one of those guys to where, you would love to see him with the same organization. He's won a championship in Milwaukee, brought it back there. Unbelievable run that year, just 50 piece in the deciding game. Just remarkable. But what the Milwaukee Bucks have done over the last, say, 3 to 4 years, man, is just straight malpractice. And just big game hunting and just... This is what happens when you have a superstar player, man, in your organization. Teams, the pressure is on, dude. You got to make those moves. And, once they won the championship, just move on top of move was just, not the move. And so they're in this situation now. So we'll see what that do moving forward, man. That was just crazy how it came down the pipeline a little bit earlier today. Then also, two news that broke earlier today, overnight, is that the Los Angeles Clippers told Chris Paul to take his ball and go home. Chris Paul in his final NBA season, it was announced less than a week or so ago. I know they had played up in Charlotte, man. He's from the Charlotte area, Carolina area. Up there, more closer to, Wake and, just in that particular area. But, man, it's just a situation to where this is just crazy to me. Especially when a guy that has played 20 years in the NBA at the point guard position, one of the greatest point guards to ever play. I mean, he's the first ballot Hall of Famer. You can argue where you got him on a list of, say, point guards overall. And, that's a conversation that we definitely probably get into a little bit later on, man. But, man, this is crazy. And, I want to sit back and also, too, just kind of research it down just a little bit. Like, man, what the hell happened? And the first thing that came across my mind was that, man, I hope Chris Paul wasn't in there being Chris Paul. And, this Clippers team is going nowhere. I think Lawrence Frank, the general manager of the Los Angeles Clippers, I think it's been one, fam. I think it's time for the Clippers to ceremoniously move on, man, and just let him go from his services. This guy's just, when you produce a team that is literally the oldest team that has ever been put together in NBA history, especially in 2025. Nah, fam. It ain't gonna work, fam. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care what the name is on the back of the jersey, dude. Like, if you got the oldest team ever in 2025 that's ever been put together, even though, you know, athletes have, you know, definitely playing the older ages, don't, you know what I mean? So I'm down with the OGs. But, dude, just the injuries and just the wear and tear of an 82-game season, and you're in the Western Conference, dude, where it's smoke every single night you playing. Yeah, it's crash and burn, man. And I'm not sure what happened with Ty Lue. Word on the street is Ty Lue and Chris Paul, they wasn't on speaking terms. That's just like crazy to me. Two guys who played point guard, you know, Ty Lue, former point guard in the league, man. So that definitely just was a head scratcher. You know, definitely probably get into that a little bit more in the next episode, man. But it'll be crazy, man, for Chris Paul to get, you know, be cut now and for nobody to pick him up. But to close this thing out, man, I do think that the Los Angeles Lakers might make, you know what I mean, a javelin throw at him, man. I mean, he in Los Angeles, stay close to his kids and so forth. His family lives in Los Angeles. You know, that might be a thing, man. We'll peel that on your back at another time, though. But coming up, man, I got the rest of the show, man. Man, I appreciate y'all checking in. Don't forget also, too, man, to check us out on Facebook. You know, we out here on YouTube. We on Fire Sports, on X. Just across the whole deal, man. So I appreciate you, man, coming up. Got the rest of the show. We'll break down the National Football League. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The Spot. Yeah, man, we're going to get into week number 13 across the National Football League. As now we're definitely into wintertime, man, as the weather's changing across the country. And, you know, it's that warm, cozy on up with your favorite, you know, snack, favorite food, favorite beverage. Definitely something warm, especially if you're in the Northeast and what I call the cold part of the United States. And so, man, I love this time of the year because now definitely into crunch time in the NFL, even though, you know, a couple years ago they added an extra game. Yeah, man, this is what a nitty get gritty, man, out here, man. So we're going to break down week number 13, man. Some of these nice little matchups we got, like I said, kind of into these crunch time kind of matchups, especially, too, with the NFL now. Over the last couple of years, we've kind of switched, or we're going to get into more divisional play towards the stretch of the final part of the season. But I was loving just the matchups, man, on paper coming into the holiday slate. Man, I know you guys have now finally put over or got rid of the leftovers out here, man. So we're going to get right into, man, week number 13. Just a little recap of what occurred and what jumped off. And first and foremost, man, we got that Thursday slate, man, holiday slate. You know, we all was just kicking back and enjoying it. It seemed like it was just a couple days ago. Now we're nearly a week away, you know, from the holiday Thursday Thanksgiving feast. But the Green Bay Packers, man, traveled up to Detroit to take on the Detroit Lions. Green Bay was able to win this game 31-24. Jordan Love, man, 4 touchdowns in this football game. And Jordan Love, to me, you know, he like the stock market, man. Sometimes the stock is up, sometimes the stock is down, man. The stock was up against the Detroit Lions. This Detroit Lions team, especially last season, man, coming off losing their 2 coordinators, you know, Dan Campbell just, you know, having to replace, you know, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, man, up in Chicago for my Chicago Bears. You know, we knew it was going to be a transition, you know, definitely with the talent that they have with Gibbs and St. Brown. St. Brown's not currently on the men. Speaking of St. Brown with an ankle injury, don't look like he's going to be playing in, you know, the next coming up here in week number 14. But I just don't know about this team, man. Is that we thought, you know, they had a 4-game winning streak, you know, about a month or so ago. We thought the team had finally kind of, you know, got over the hangover of losing their coordinators, and then it came back to bite them. And this team taking this L right now, man, on the Thursday game slate was huge for the Detroit Lions from a standpoint of now they're from the outside looking in into the playoff picture. You know, they schedule, you know, it's not an easy schedule coming down the stretch. And so for the Packers, you know, 8-3-1 out here, you know, at the second place in the NFC North behind my Chicago Bears. You know, this is a defense that is a pretty good defense. I'm not going to go ahead and plant the flag and say that this is the best defense in the National Football League, but I do think that they can operate at a top 5 clip, especially when you got Micah Parsons out there, man, chasing down quarterbacks and just loving just the versatility, you know, that he brings and kind of makes guys around him better up in Green Bay. And so just for all of that, man, you know, definitely a nice little win for the Packers, man, in the Thursday night slate. And like I said, for the Lions, you're on the outside looking in at this point. I just think that, not saying that this team is not talented enough to make a playoff push, but they put themselves behind the 8-ball, man, losing to the Green Bay Packers, man, on Thanksgiving. So let's see what both these teams do moving forward. Also, a game that most of America I definitely know was tuning in from a national slate. We had the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Dallas Cowboys. Chiefs traveled down to Dallas. It was a home sledding, from Patrick Mahomes. He grew up, in the Dallas, Texas area, went to Texas Tech. And for him, it really won a good homecoming, man, as the Dallas Cowboys was able to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs 31-28. It's just a situation, man, with the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, they had a couple injuries earlier this season. You had Rashid Rice being suspended. I think that this defense is not the same caliber defense as we saw last season. That spreads also to Chris Jones. I just think that, this season, he hadn't been really that man-child. He's been good, but he hadn't been that man-child that they need him to be. And we saw it. The Cowboys putting up 31 points on them. And, I know a lot of people down in Dallas are obviously excited for the victory, and there's a lot of talk with a lot of talking heads across the country just saying that, hey, the Dallas Cowboys may make a run. I'm just going to hold off on that right now. Especially, too, because we don't really know, man. This is a week-to-week league. This team is 5-5-1, if I'm not mistaken, on the season. I'm sorry, 6-5-1 on the season for the Dallas Cowboys. And you still on the outside looking in. And to me, these next, couple of weeks for the Dallas Cowboys, the next 2 weeks for them, it's going to be pretty much that season. They got what you think on paper, with Washington and the New York Giants at the, tail end of the season for them is easy, winnable games, but you never know in this league. So we'll see what the Cowboys do moving forward. Now we're going to get into these Chiefs. Because fans of the show, OGs of the show, man, know that, I was one to plant that flag and just say that, man, I think that the Chiefs dynasty as we know it is about over. And what I mean from that standpoint is that I just think that we saw this last season in the Super Bowl, is that from a talent standpoint, there's other teams across the National Football League that are more talented from top to bottom. Now, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, but we seen this in New England with Tom Brady, in this, stint. A lot of people forget that this team, talking about the New England Patriots, won a 10-year, decade stretch, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, from winning the Super Bowl in between them. And so the reason I bring up the New England Patriots is that they got comfortable with Tom Brady. And I think that the Kansas City Chiefs has gotten a little comfortable with Patrick Mahomes. And for me, it's a situation where Andy Reid, great coach, Hall of Fame coach, was able to revitalize his career up in Kansas City. And I'm not putting no shade on Andy Reid, but this team has been through a lot of heavyweight bouts. And just like boxing, man, is that when you get into a lot of heavyweight bang them out type of bouts, it can take a couple years off you. And I think we seeing that with the Chiefs. They've lost a lot of close games this season. They still, got an opportunity to get themselves into the playoffs. But to me, at this point, they got to win out because they from the outside looking in once again. And so we'll see what they do moving forward, man. I just know, what I said a little bit earlier this season when I saw this football club, I said, man, at the end of the day, last time I saw them in the Super Bowl, the team on the other side, the Philadelphia Eagles, was more talented. And looking at pretty much 2.5 months, close to 3 months of this NFL season, is that, we see that teams are just a little bit more talented than them, and that it come back to bite them in the most opportune times for the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll see what they do moving forward, man. It's definitely going to be locked in between these two football clubs, man, just their perspective moving forward. So we'll definitely see what they do. And another added theme, man, in this current week in the National Football League that it just passed, is that teams that you would think, such as like the Chiefs, that definitely gonna make a run in the AFC. Another team that hadn't really had a great season so far and it's been topsy-turvy, and that's the Baltimore Ravens as the Cincinnati Bengals traveled down to Baltimore, and the Bengals was able to win this game 32-14. This game most notably is the comeback of Joe Burrow back into the fold. He's been on the mend. The Bengals, they hang up by a thread. They basically got to win out to have a puncher's chance at trying to get into the playoffs on the AFC side. And the Ravens, they in that same boat of taking an L. And Lamar Jackson ain't been Lamar Jackson, folks, for at least a month. At least 4 weeks. He hasn't been the same guy. Now, word on the street, he's been banged up. That's cool. There's a lot of quarterbacks who banged up right now. And so he at the point with no excuses. And, just circling back, at the debut, season debut for me, episode 1, I broke it down in great detail. I said that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson is the two biggest dudes that got the most pressure of them coming into this season. And Lamar Jackson at this point is no excuses. For the Baltimore Ravens, there's no excuses. They definitely still got a puncher's chance at winning the AFC North. Pittsburgh, falling down and sliding down the razor blade into an alcohol river. But this team hasn't looked good, at least for about a month. So we'll see what it do with the Baltimore, at least for about 3 weeks. So we'll see what it do, man, for the Baltimore Ravens moving forward. And then, I got to get into my Chicago Bears. Yeah, man. Number 1 in the NFC right now. Number 1 seed for the Chicago Bears. They traveled down to Philadelphia to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. And, man, was this just a Philly street fight. I mean, the Bears just straight up the gut. I mean, Manunga 100 yards, Swift 100 yards. You get 100 yards. You get 100 yards. It's been a long time since Chicago. We've had 2 running backs that have 100 yards in the same game. I mean, going back 40 plus years. I was a youngin'. Remember, all that, great football time for my Chicago Bears back in the mid 80s. But to me, the Bears went in there, carrying the stick. Just give you the scene back in the day with Snoop Dogg at the Source Awards. We know where we at. You know what I'm saying? Philly in the house. But at the end of the day, it was up. The Bears were able to win this game 24-15. I just break it down from a standpoint of Bears are just a hungry football team. Now, Philadelphia Eagles, just on the kind of flip side of that, before I kind of take another dive into my Chicago Bears, is that, this is a team that has lost their identity. And A.J. Brown put it out there a couple weeks ago, and I was riding with A.J. Brown when he said it, is that this team got fat cat-itis and they're not making adjustments offensively. Now, my Chicago Bears lead the league defensively in turnovers, so I knew they was going to come out and at least get a turnover in some kind of shape or fashion. We saw the tush push that got shut down, man, with a fumble on Jalen Hurts. Big time plays across the board for the Chicago Bears in this football game. Deshaun Wright, big interception in this football game. So Bears looking like a real complete football team. Caleb Williams, he didn't bring his A game, but it was windy as hell out there, man. So, for him and for the Chicago Bears organization, it does feel good to see that this team is now a cohesive unit. And Ben Johnson, outstanding job. And there's a lot of people that was throwing a lot of dirt on, Caleb Williams and Chicago and not the right situation and some of these national talking heads, and I don't want to jump on the bandwagon. But at the end of the day, for me, there's a lot of people saying we got room now. We ain't got no room on the bandwagon, because what Ryan Poles was able to do with this organization, him and Kevin Warren up in Chicago, man, has been a tremendous job. Bears still got to finish their food. They got a grudge match against the Green Bay Packers coming up, this weekend, man. So we'll see what it do, man. But this was a matchup that I was locked and loaded for, man. It was a good, nice little clip, man, on that Black Friday. And, man, the Sunday slate, it's interesting, man, because, looking at the schedule, and I was just like, man, they made sure that them Thursday and Friday games, when folks was at the crib kicking it with family and friends and so forth, they were some real good matchups, man. And I thought, coming into Sunday, it was going to be a situation where it might have been a drop-off. But, one of the games that I was tuning in, I watched majority of this football game, was the Houston Texans taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Colts, there's a lot of people out there, man, was riding high with the Colts, and now a lot of people think that, the clock has struck 12 on the Snow White. And so I'm not sure, because in watching this football game, the Texans, man, one of the best, or probably the best defense in the National Football League, them and the Seattle Seahawks, man. I knew it was going to be a grudge match. I knew that, Jonathan Taylor, as special as he was, I didn't expect him to go out there and run for 175 yards on Houston Texans. I thought it was going to be a close divisional type of matchup, and it ended up being that 20-16. Daniel Jones, I mean, it is what it is, man. I told you, and fans of the show know how I feel about Daniel Jones and his tenure in New York. I thought he was a backup quarterback. Now, he's had a good season so far, but, it's great when you're playing behind a future Hall of Famer running back such as Jonathan Taylor, make life a little bit easier for you. Now, he's a little nicked up. Obviously, he's a little immobile in the pocket, and Will Anderson and just the heat that D'Amico Ryans was bringing to the table, man, had the Colts in the tailspin. This team now has dropped, 2 out of the last 3 football games for this club. And now we got, Jacksonville sitting in pole position in that AFC South. And the AFC South has gotten real interesting because you got Jacksonville, you got the Colts, you got the Texans. All three of these teams could potentially get into the AFC in the playoff picture. You know, what that spells, you know, for teams like, you know, the Chargers and teams like the Chiefs. You might be, you know, on the outside looking in. Shout out to 8-Ball and MJG back in the day. You know, what it do. But yeah, man, we'll definitely see what it do. But that division has gotten a lot interested, man, since Sunday, man. So, you know, shout out across the board. Just in that young AFC South. Then we're going to travel, man, back over to the NFC side, man. We had the Los Angeles Rams travel up to Charlotte, or across the country to Charlotte, to take on the Carolina Panthers. Panthers with the upset special of the week, winning this football game 31-28. Man, I was just impressed from a standpoint of just the hungriness. And I got to get a special, you know, tip of the cap man to Dan Canales, because he's done an outstanding job with this football team. And a lot of people thought that this team was basically back into the, you know, the NFL draft in April at the beginning of the year. But for them to be 7-6 on the year, man, it's just a commendable job that this man has done with this team and this organization. Finally got a little bit of hope. I'm still iffy on Bryce Young. You know, the Rams, you know, Matt Stafford, man, he had been playing an outstanding stretch, a historic stretch with, you know, over 20-plus touchdowns and no interceptions. I knew that was going to come to an end at some point. Just happened to be a pick six. It was definitely, to me, the play of the game, just looking at the spread at the end of the day. And so, you know, the Rams, you know, they started off on Sunday at the number one pole position in the NFC with the bye and with this loss. You know, my Bears leapfrog them real quick, but, you know, we'll see. It's a lot of, you know, football left to be played, man, for the rest of the regular season. And also, man, before we wrap this thing up, we're just going to get into, you know, a few other contests across the NFC. We had the Seahawks, man, taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings traveled up to Seattle. Everybody knew Seattle was just foaming at the mouth, especially with the young quarterback that the Vikings had in, man. I mean, oh, my, man, this thing 26-0 straight donut. It's the first shutout, man, that the Seahawks have had in the last, 10 years plus since the Legion of Boom up there. And just for the Vikings, man, it's a wrap. Made a mistake and let two quarterbacks get out of the door, and Daniel Jones also too, and Sam Darnold. You put, you know, all your chips in on J.J. McCarthy, a guy that probably threw the football maybe 9 or 10 times at the University of Michigan. You know, you reap what you sold out here, man. You let two quarterbacks get out of the door. You put all your weight on a rookie. He's been banged up and been very, very inconsistent so far this season. So to me, for Minnesota, this is pretty much a lost season. For Seattle, man, 9-3. You know, they're definitely in the hunt, you know, in that NFC as well for a potential number one seed, man. This team and Coach McDonald is doing a good job. So we'll definitely see what it do moving forward. And before we put a wrap on this young thing, man, we definitely got to talk about them young Bills against the Steelers. You know, it's a situation with Aaron Rodgers making the triumphant return back. You know, had a little risk situation. Didn't play last week against my Chicago Bears. Josh Allen, you know, and the Bills was able to handle that business 26-7. There was a lot of fire Tomlin chants out there, and I'll go ahead and put it out there, man. Mike Tomlin, the longest tenured head coach of the National Football League. You know, I think he still has the pulse of this team. I just think that Omar Khan, the general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers, got some explaining to do, Lucy. Because, yeah, you pay, you know, T.J. Watt and you got Cam Hayward, but your defense is still getting a little bit up there in age, and they've lost a little bit bark in that. And so from the offensive side, you bring in a quarterback and Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer. You know, he's 40-plus years old, man. So, you know, it's just a shot in the dark. There's only one guy at age 40 that's able to lead an organization to a Super Bowl championship, and that was Tom Brady. That's the first time that's ever happened. It might be the first time it ever will happen. We never know with that. And so I thought that the Pittsburgh Steelers, you know, shaking the dice, and, you know, right now they're in a situation where they still can win the AFC North. You know, that's another division that's going to get nitty and gritty as we get down to the final couple weeks of the regular season, man. So we'll definitely see what it do. You know, man, so it was a nice little slate, man. You know, I mentioned the Los Angeles Chargers. You know, they was able to beat the Raiders, you know, this weekend as well, winning 31-14. Biggest thing for me, Justin Herbert getting nicked up once again, man. This guy always get nicked up at some type of point of the season, man, for the Chargers, man. And so we'll see what Harbaugh do. As I mentioned, they could be a team on the outside looking in from the playoff picture, man. So this thing is very going to get interesting. And can't forget about the Denver Broncos, man, and the other team on the AFC side along with the New England Patriots. You know, fresh off they win on Monday night against the New York Giants. Both these teams, you know, looking good in that AFC. As the Patriots sitting in that number one pole position, but the Broncos is right on their heels. You know, both these teams are question marks, man. So it's been an interesting topsy-turvy type of NFL season. We'll definitely see what it do, man. But first and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. Coming up, I got the rest of the show, man, but I appreciate everything, man. So we'll get right into it. Coming up, We on Fire Sports Podcast. The Spot. Welcome back. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, man, as we took a dive a little bit across, just the sporting landscape. Can't forget about the National Basketball Association, man. As mentioned a little bit earlier at the top of the show, man, Zion Williamson is going to be out for 3 weeks. That ain't new news for nobody, man. It's just a situation, man, down there in New Orleans, man. Joe Dumas, he might as well hit the whole reset button, which I predicted it last summer, but I think it's going to happen this summer or probably within the season. The Zion Williamson days in New Orleans is definitely numbered. I think that both parties are going to move on. Might see that maybe with Ja Morant, but with these guys being the first and second pick in their respective draft, the first basically two guys to go first and second in the draft, basically from the same area. You got to go all the way back to 1981 with Isaiah Thomas and Mark Aguirre, a long time ago. Actually from my neighborhood, man. Shout out the west side of Chicago. And it's just interesting that these two young guys just at a crossroads, at their career. From a popularity standpoint, from an availability standpoint. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what both, them and Memphis do, pivoting, trying to move forward just in regards. But just on a more positive note, and I kind of start in the Western Conference, man, the Oklahoma City Thunder, man. They're just rolling, man. 12 wins in a row, man. They got Jalen came back, for them, could have been easily, to me, Finals MVP without Shai Gilgeous, just contributions, in the NBA Finals, but they really didn't miss them. They didn't miss them. They was rolling, before Jalen got hurt, and now he back. And so I just think that this team, man, they just young and they just out here having fun, man, and they got a formula and a pattern, and they ain't looking back from it. So to me, it's Oklahoma City at the top, the penthouse floor in the Western Conference, and then it's everybody else. Of that everybody else, you got the Houstons of the world and Denvers of the world. Right now, they're sitting in third and fourth spot, man, in the Western Conference. I just think with both of those teams, it's going to be exciting just to see the growth from both these teams. I think Denver kind of locked and loaded. I love the additions that they made, during the offseason coming into this year. And we've seen that, play itself out. And so, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Aaron Gordon, obviously, out on the mend, but, he'll be back be back, hopefully soon. He getting nicked up a few times during the season. Ain't no biggie. Houston Rockets, for them, just really kind of getting that continuity together. You got Kevin Durant into the fold, so we'll see what it do, man, for Houston. For them, they took a L, then they last out and out there, man. But, I think overall, man, I think Houston will be fine kind of moving forward. You got the Spurs who start off hot, Wemby, still kind of out a little bit, just kind of nicked up a little bit, but the Spurs trying to hold it down, man. But it's just, for me, especially with young teams, you may not never get that momentum back that you had earlier in the season, or if you do, it could be a situation where you kind of climbing uphill versus kind of sitting in a kind of a pole position or just a good little view. So we'll see what it do, man. Right now they're in the 5 position. You got Minnesota right there, Phoenix, who's surprising to me. Just across the board, young team, they put all the chips in, Matt Ishbia. There's been a lot of reports out here most recently too about the workplace conduct and just, how people feel about the swag that Ishbia got out there, man, in Phoenix. But surprisingly, the product on the court has actually been playing some good ball, man, so far. Bigger than my expectations of this basketball club. And Devin Booker now, the OG, the front man for the Phoenix Suns. We'll definitely see what it do. The Warriors been up and down, man. It's just been up and down. For every game, I think, okay, this team, the young players and, with Butler and, just kind of making moves, Al Horford, they added, to the sauce, and, you got Brzezinski and, just kind of Moody and the other young players that they have. They just been up and down. Steph obviously, most notably injured, just kind of, took a little nick, and he'll be out for a little bit, but I think this is what we may see. Now, this team is hot enough to make a run as they tried to do last season, but That's not guaranteed in this Western Conference, man. And so I think that the West, pretty much the teams who I expected, and I can't forget about the Los Angeles Lakers. Lakers fans, don't kill me. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Los Angeles Lakers. 15-5 through their first 20 games of the year. I'm just kind of liking what I'm seeing from Luka Doncic. He came into camp, more in shape, more healthier. Obviously Austin Reeves has been Austin, what I call Austin Superman Reeves. Been playing some good ball. I like it. I think the best thing that could have happened to this ball club was LeBron James being out, being injured and being just on the mend, letting this team grow a little bit. And so I'm not going to plant a flag and say, man, this Western Conference Finals. I'm not going to do all that hot garbage, you know what I'm saying? But I do like what I see from the Los Angeles Lakers so far this season, man. We'll see if they have a little bit more continued success up there in the Western Conference. Then in the East, man, got to put some respect, man. Detroit, stand up. What up, though? Shout out to Coney Island, man. My people, up in Detroit, man. It's all love, man. You got 7 Mile, 8 Mile, man. Belle Ave, just the whole swag, man. Just, crossing over into Canada on the Ambassador Bridge, man. Much love, say to young Detroit, man. But this team and what they've been able to do, pivoting from Monty Williams a couple years ago, which I thought to me he was always an overrated coach in my personal opinion. No disrespect to him, but I just think that he is not the guy to pull you up by the bootstraps for a young ball club in today's NBA. They made the move, JB Bickerstaff, man. Cleveland let him go, man. He, did that 2-step straight to Detroit, man, and it's been on and cracking. They sitting at the top of the East. The Knicks, they've been all right. The Knicks, a lot of people put pressure on the Knicks as they, East to lose. I don't see it that way. Meaning that the Knicks, at the end of the day, you got to earn your keep out here. And so there's some young teams that I just mentioned, with Detroit, playing some good basketball, man. Like, ain't nobody really studying y'all, man, if y'all ain't get your act together. But they playing some reasonably good basketball. Shout out to the Miami Heat, too, a team that a lot of people just thought was Riles and, oh, man, let Jimmy Butler go. Eric Spoelstra got them cooking a little bit, man. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Heat. They've been gutting out wins, and, they're playing as a cohesive unit. So I'm liking what I'm seeing. Cleveland, I don't know, Kenny Atkinson. I don't know. It's just, they've been kind of, the air was let out of the balloon the last, 2-3 weeks of the regular season going to the playoffs for Cleveland, and it's kind of got into this season a little bit, man, for them, man. So we'll definitely see what they do as well moving forward. Orlando playing some good ball. Obviously got my Chicago Bulls, man. A lot of people was, geeking off the Miles Sauce up there in Chicago, man, the first, week or so of the season. And at the end of the day, man, when you're a young basketball team, yeah, you can easily come out in the first 2 weeks of the season, catch team off guard. Still got guys kind of getting into shape and getting orientated. But when the rubber hit the road, if you don't have what I consider all-star, bona fide all-star, at least one all-star bona fide one, you're going to be in this purgatory. And I'm going to go ahead and put it out there, put a bow on it, man. I think that Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, I think that they should be no longer employed by the Chicago Bulls. I just think that the Bulls just need a new direction. They got a couple young pieces, but at the end of the day, man, we're trying to raise another Larry O'Brien. We're not a small market basketball team wishing on a star. So that's basically kind of my look across the NBA, and we'll get more into the NBA, man, coming up more and more. Obviously, we got the nitty-gritty of the college football and the National Football League as well, but we're going to show love more on the NBA side, man, coming up, man, just real soon across the board, man. So that's it, man. I appreciate you guys checking in, man. Another wonderful episode. I know it's been about a hot 2 weeks before I hit you guys up. But, man, just holiday, doing what I do, man, just kind of putting things together, man. But I'm back into the fold, man, back into this final stretch of 2025 as things are going to heat up across the whole sporting landscape. And so, man, I'll catch you guys next episode, man. I appreciate all the love. I appreciate all the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. That's fire.